Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SBA's certification webinar. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Sandra Anguiano, and I'm a Business Opportunity Specialist at the Orange County Inland Empire District Office. Here we cover the counties of Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino in Southern California. But please note that the programs we're going to be discussing today are available nationwide. You will receive a copy of the presentation as well as a link to the recording, so you don't have to worry about taking screenshots or trying to write down those links. We will share the presentation and it will have live links for you to go ahead and just click on them. So today we're going to be covering the 4 SBA certification programs, which are the 8A Business Development Program, the HUBZone Program, the Woman-Owned Small Business Contracting Program, and we'll very briefly go over the Veterans Certification Program. For those of you who have joined online via Teams, please make sure to use the Q&A box to type out any questions. We don't have the function to unmute the lines, so we can't take your questions live on the phone, but we will be answering those in the chat. So please feel free to use that, and we will get to them throughout the presentation. If you have any specific questions that you'd like to discuss, related to your business, I will be sharing my contact information at the end of the presentation, so you can reach out to me directly, and we can talk about that offline as well. Now, before jumping into the programs, I'm going to be giving you a quick introduction to government contracting. This may be useful information for those of you that are just starting off, or maybe, a refresher or clarification for those of you who have already started the process. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first question that comes to mind is, what does the government buy? So the federal government buys just about everything, from office supplies to janitorial services, to construction of government facilities, and much more. They are the largest procurer of goods and services, which set annual goals for their huge budget. So small businesses should do their market research to determine if the federal government buys its product or service. We recommend that you do your market research to find out what the government is buying. And in the next few slides, we are going to cover a few useful links for you to use as a starting point. At this time, I would also like to point out that there are various levels of government and not all certifications are equal. The state is going to have its own process of procuring, cities have their own programs, and we even have large businesses and prime contractors who have their own process. So it's very important for you to identify who you want to do business with to determine what certification it is that you need. So where can you go to conduct market research? On this slide here, we share a few links to help you get started with that. First off, we have sam.gov. For all government certifications, you will be required to have a SAM account set up. So this is something that you want to get started on, as soon as possible. On this website, you can search by keyword, by industry. You can narrow it down to a specific state, or if you're, particularly looking to do business with a specific agency, you can search that way as well to find opportunities that are available. Everything gets listed on sam.gov, the System for Award Management. This is an essential resource. So all federal contract solicitations or invitations to bid with the value of $25,000 or more are published here on this site. So you can set up your profile for free. If you have any trouble doing that, you're not too sure, you can reach out to a resource partner to help guide you through that process. There are a few steps and some accounts that you have to set up before you can create your profile. So it does take some time. So you want to make sure that you get started on that as soon as possible. We also have the Dynamic Small Business Search System. Or actually, they've recently changed that to the SBS system. So this site allows you to look at which contractors are selling to the federal government. So it helps you identify who your competitors are. This system is managed by the SBA. So once you get approved for any of SBA certifications, they will be listed on this profile here. We have the Interagency Directory, or ICD. So this is a central repository of indefinite delivery vehicles awarded by the federal agencies, where the IDV is available for use at both the intra-agency and interagency levels. So this is going to include government-wide acquisition contracts, multi-agency contracts, federal supply schedules, basic ordering agreements, and blanket purchase agreements. Then we have usaspending.gov. So this site provides information on how the federal government spends money or how they forecast to. It is the official source for spending data for the U.S. government, and its mission is to show the American people what the federal government spends every year and how it spends the money. So you can follow the money from the congressional appropriations to the federal agencies and even down to local communities and businesses. So it's a great tool for conducting your market research. Then we have the GSA e-library. This is your one source for the latest GSA contract award information. And then there's also the Acquisition Central site. So this site lets you search for forecasts by agency. So each agency has its own website, and they have all their different tabs on there. So this site actually helps you consolidate that information. Instead of jumping around from site to site, this is like a one-stop shop. So the law requires agencies to compile and make available projections of contracting opportunities that small, minority, and women-owned businesses may be able to perform. So each of these links on this slide will take you to their sites. So this is a great starting point for you to conduct that market research. You'll notice that when you visit all of their sites, you'll see that they each offer different trainings and webinars, and they have, their listed points of contacts for any questions that you may have. So I invite you to check them out once you receive a copy of the presentation.
So the federal government has prime contracting procurement goals that must annually be met. There are certain set-asides for certification programs and socioeconomic categories. Of the huge budget that the federal government receives each year, 23% of their total contracting dollars must be spent on small business. Specifically, there are targeted set-asides and acquisition goals for the following programs. 5% must go to woman-owned small businesses. 5% must go to small disadvantaged businesses, such as 8A firms. 3% must go to HUBZone businesses, and 5% must go to service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. These set-asides are reserved for small businesses between $15,000, which is the micro purchase threshold, to $350,000, which is the simplified acquisition threshold.
In order to be eligible for the SBA's certification programs, you must be a small business in accordance with the SBA's size standards. So the SBA determines the size standards for a small business, and there are two ways that size is looked at. So size will be determined either by your average revenues over the past 5 years or by the number of employees. For the number of employees, this is going to apply to those in industries such as manufacturing, dealers, and wholesalers. So this is going to depend upon your primary industry code. You will need to determine your primary industry code in order to determine if you fall under the threshold for revenue or number of employees. We do have a link for the size standard table provided in this slide. There are hundreds of NAICS codes, so the first step would be to identify your code and then look it up to determine if you are considered small based on SBA's size standards. What types of businesses are getting contracts? This slide here provides an overview as to how or where the government spent its money. It is broken down by industry codes. So there are various sectors depending upon which product or service you provide. Industry codes are very important in the federal government. You want to make sure that you get familiar with them. NAICS codes, you're going to hear this over and over again. the North American Industry Classification System. Essentially, what that means is that you pick the code that best suits your business, and you use that code, when you're asked to provide, what kind of industry you're in. No one assigns you a NAICS code. You alone must identify your industry code. These NAICS codes are used to track what the federal government is buying, and you must have this number listed on SAM to demonstrate that you can provide a specific product or service. So as long as you have a business, you must have a business activity code. And this code merely describes your primary and secondary income producing lines of business. So most businesses have more than one revenue producing line of business. You will need to identify one industry as your primary source of income, but you can have more than one industry listed on your profile. You can, list additional industry codes as secondary codes. As long as you can provide that service and have the appropriate licenses, you can list those codes on your profile to show all the kinds of work that you do. As you start working with the federal government, you may want to look for opportunities as a subcontractor. So typically primes or large businesses get contracts, and these subs work under them. So if you aren't at the level to perform on your own as a prime, you would subcontract. It is a great opportunity for small businesses to gain capacity and experience. You can list this as past performance for working as a subcontractor. Large procurements have subcontracting requirements, so prime contractors are looking for small businesses like you. You want to make sure that you visit their websites or contact their supplier diversity department to learn how to do business with them and become a sub. For subcontracting opportunities, you can search Subnet, which is a database of subcontracting opportunities posted by large contractors looking for small businesses to serve as subcontractors. So that is also available to you. The SBA maintains a directory of federal government prime contractors with subcontracting plans. The GSA publishes a subcontracting directory for small businesses that are looking for subcontracting opportunities with prime contractors. So the directory lists large business prime contractors that are required to establish plans and goals for subcontracting with small businesses. Now, as you start digging into contracting, you will discover that there are many tiers. So here are a few tips that we offer for starting to work with federal agencies. We recommend that you focus on a few agencies at a time. Do your research, concentrate on those. There are numerous agencies and they all buy various things. So review their forecast to see what's coming and visit their websites. You can also contact the agency directly. Each website will have a listed Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, the OSDB, and you can learn how to do business with them by contacting that department. Like I said, you must register on sam.gov if you want to do business with the federal government. sam.gov is where, the federal government will confirm that you are a legitimate business. And this is also where you will be paid for providing your product or service. Setting up that SAM profile is going to be step number one for any SBA certification program, because your SAM profile will be verified and must show as active before you may begin the application process for any of SBA's certification programs. Setting up a SAM profile is completely free, so make sure you are on the right site. If you are asked to pay, you're probably in the wrong spot. So make sure, when you visit the website that you see that message there in the top right corner, official U.S. government website, 100% free. Now this process can take 4 to 6 weeks, so you want to make sure that you start setting it up as soon as possible to avoid any delays when you're ready to submit your application for any of our programs. If you'd like more general information on government contracting, I invite you to visit SBA's Government Contracting Classroom. Here you will find 5 to 6 minute videos on various topics related to government contracting. There are even videos on how to set up your SAM profile, how to contact the OSDBU, and many other topics. So I recommend that you check them out if you have no knowledge yet. This is free and you can play the videos as many times as you'd like. The SBA also has a YouTube channel with helpful videos, so you make sure you check that out as well. If you are interested in doing business with other government levels, you want to make sure that you visit their websites to learn their process. All of SBA certification programs are at the federal level. If you are looking to get certified as an SBE or DVBE, you would need to go through state procurement. If you are within our Tri-County area, you can reach out to each county as well to learn how to do business with them. Different organizations administer different programs. Their process is completely different from the SBA applications. For assistance, you can reach out to your local Apex Accelerator. These were formerly PTAC. For assistance, this resource partner is funded by DoD, and they assist small businesses with procurement. So check them out, find your local one, and reach out to them for assistance with any federal, state, or local certifications as well. And again, it's really important to find out who you want to do business with first to learn what you need to do in order to participate in their programs. So this concludes the introduction to federal government contracting. I hope you have found this information useful and that you will visit the links once you receive a copy of the presentation. Okay. We will now go ahead and get started with the information on the 8A Business Development Program. So the 8A Business Development Program was named after a section of the Small Business Act and designated to help small, disadvantaged businesses to compete in the American economy and access the federal procurement market. So it was created, to help firms that are owned and controlled by at least 51% socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. We will talk about what it means to be socially and economically disadvantaged when we get to the eligibility criteria. We will also go over what it means to be owned and controlled and how the SBA reviews that information. The program provides entrepreneurs with targeted management and technical assistance to help them compete for contracts and other business opportunities. This program offers a 9-year term and a one-time only participation, and we'll further discuss that in the following slides.
So what are the benefits of the program? Why should you get certified in the 8A program? The federal government's goal is to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to small disadvantaged businesses each year. As a participant in the program, we will provide you with management and technical assistance, marketing and outreach assistance with the mentor protege and joint venture programs. You can even form joint ventures with established businesses through the SBA's mentor protege program. And you will also have access to surplus property. These are tools and equipment from the state for pennies on the dollar. The biggest draw to the program, however, is the contract set-asides and sole source award opportunities. These set-asides can be for up to $5.5 million for goods and services and up to $8.5 million for manufacturing. As a small business, you can also participate in the SBA's Empowered to Grow program. This was formerly known as the 7J Management and Technical Assistance Program. And you can take advantage of various courses and trainings that are available to you at no cost. The program provides eligible disadvantaged U.S. small businesses with free business courses, tailored training, and one-on-one consulting to support their growth, operations, hiring, regulatory compliance, and government contracting competitiveness. So visit the link to check out the resources that are available to you 100% completely free.
Okay, in the next few slides, we will be talking about the eligibility requirements for this program. So each category listed here will be something that you will be asked to provide information for in order to determine your eligibility. So we're going to talk about ownership, control, U.S. citizens, small business size standards, potential for success, good character, social disadvantage, and economic disadvantage. On the right is the reference for the Code of Federal Regulations in case you are interested in looking up all the legal terms. Please note that you must be in business for at least 2 years before applying for this program, and I'll explain why later on. First, let's go ahead and talk about ownership. So we require that the individual upon whom eligibility is based directly and unconditionally own at least 51% of the firm. This must be direct ownership by the disadvantaged individual. You cannot be owned by another company. You cannot be owned by another trust. You must be the individual owner at 51% or more. Now, that can be more than one person to make up that 51%. If you have more than one owner, each individual will need to meet every eligibility criteria. If you are married and residing in a community property state, it may be necessary to submit a notarized transmutation agreement to ensure that the disadvantaged individual owns at least 51%. Community property rights impact the unconditional ownership. There is no requirement on the structure of the business. You can be a partnership, a sole proprietorship, LLC, corporation, whatever business structure. But these are examples of what the SBA will require to demonstrate that 51% ownership. So we're going to ask to see things like the stock certificates and ledgers, your IRS 1040, including all schedules, depending on your business structure, Schedule C, Schedule E. You're going to have to submit copies of your firm's tax returns. So, what the reviewer will be looking for is proof that on paper you can demonstrate that you own at least 51% of the business. Control. We require that the individual hold the highest position, be the highest compensated of the business in order to prove that you have control of the business. You must devote full-time hours at the business concern during your normal business hours, and this excludes any outside employment or business interests, which may hinder the firm in achieving the goals and objectives of the 8A program. The individual must have the required management expertise to operate the firm. So we're going to take a look at all these items that you see listed here to make sure that you do hold control of the business. You have to have the ability to hire and fire employees. Of course, you must be physically located in the United States, and run the daily operations of the business. Now, for all of SBA's programs, you must be a U.S. citizen in order to participate. You will be asked to provide a copy of your U.S. passport or your certificate of naturalization. To be eligible for the program, you must be a small business. So as we previously discussed, you must identify your primary NAICS code or industry code and determine if it falls under the revenue or number of employee thresholds. Now, the SBA also looks at the firms and principals' relationships with other businesses and other individuals through prior relationships, family ties, and common investments. So if you have ownership in other businesses, you must disclose that information. Keep in mind that this is used to determine the size of your business. Potential for success. So the firm must have the necessary track record and financial capacity to perform successfully on contracts awarded in the 8A program. So the firm must meet potential for success criteria. Typically, this is demonstrated by the firm being operational for at minimum two full years, as verified by revenues reported in your primary NAICS code. And we're going to use those business tax returns to verify that information. So we want to make sure that participants in our program are ready and that they will be successful in the program. We don't want this to be a burden or cost you money. We want you to come into our program, make money, and win contracts, right? Now, the federal government has certain requirements for businesses that are looking to bid on projects, which can be very different from the private sector. So in anticipation of that, we do a precursor and review your business just to make sure that you have that potential for success. So we will take a look at your financial capability, make sure you have sufficient capitalization, financial performance, bonding capacity, and manageable debts, your managerial and technical capability, performance on previous contracts, that the firm has the necessary personnel, licenses, certifications, facilities, and prior experience. Your management capability, the education, experience, and training of CEO and other managers, the magnitude and complexity of past or current jobs, and your management systems. Your qualifications for ability to perform on federal contracts, so any relevant contracting experience, and your ability to meet federal procurement policies. This is just to be sure that if you get into the program, you can take advantage of those contracting benefits and you'll be able to successfully bid and win on these contracts. So you must be in business in your primary NAICS code for at least 2 full years immediately prior to the date of your 8A application. So for at least 2 years prior to applying to the program, you must have been doing business in that primary NAICS code. This is another important reason why you want to identify those NAICS codes. Sometimes businesses transition from doing one thing to another. It could be in a related field or industry, or it could not. You could totally switch it up. So what we are looking for is proof that you have been doing work in the same NAICS code for at least 2 years. So you're going to have to provide proof that you have generated revenue under that primary NAICS code. If the business has not generated revenues for the preceding 2 years, if you don't have, business tax returns to verify that information, you can request the 2-year waiver. That is available to you. But if that's the case, you can request a waiver, and there's going to be a few conditions that have to be met in order for that waiver to be granted. So you're going to have substantial business management experience. You're going to have to demonstrate your technical expertise. You must have adequate capital, and you must have a record of successful performance on contracts. So the waiver can be granted, but the firm is going to have to address each element in detail. You're going to have to provide copies of contracts, letters of reference, to verify successful contract performance. We may ask to see copies of invoices and proof of payment on invoices, in lieu of having the tax returns, right? Now, if the firm has not generated any revenues, you have no invoices, no contracts, nothing to prove that you have been doing that, then the firm will be unable to receive that waiver of the 2-year rule. So as an owner of your firm, you should strategically consider the timing on applying if your business experience is limited and your exposure to the federal marketplace is at its infancy. Businesses who have an established track record as a subcontractor or prime contractor at the federal level, they tend to experience greater growth and higher levels of success and sustainability than those businesses that are just starting in federal contracting. So really consider, when you should apply for the program. As we mentioned early on, the 8A program is a one-time only 9-year term program. So think about when to apply to the program so you can make the most of the limited time and increase your chances of winning contracts. Ask yourself these questions and be honest with yourself. If you're a single person company who has never done a contract larger than 250,000, you may want to focus on building your business a bit more before you apply for the program. Some firms may be eligible for the program, they check off all the boxes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to contract with the federal government. Ask yourself these questions to determine if you're on a path to success. Is your business procurement ready? Make sure you are ready to do business with the government before you obtain the certifications. Can you identify the federal agencies that purchase what you sell? Have you conducted that market research already? Can you provide examples of similar work that your firm has completed that generated revenue? Are you prepared to access a line of credit or performance bond if that's required for your industry? Do you have financial and payroll systems that are compatible with the government's requirements and that can produce financial statements and payroll records? Or something as simple as, have you selected an NAICS code? Have you done that research already and identified your primary and secondary codes? Are you registered in SAM? Have you completed a capability statement? So all of these things, ask yourself these questions and really make sure that you're ready to apply so that, you don't waste this 9-year term, one-time shot into this program. Your potential for success will depend on what stage your business is in. Are you just starting up, or are you already well seasoned and can go after these contracts? Okay, another criteria for eligibility is good character. So the SBA wants to make sure that participants in our program have good character. And the SBA looks at the following to make this decision. Any adverse information regarding criminal conduct, violations of any SBA regulations, debarred or suspended firms or individuals, any principal who is incarcerated or on parole, submission of false information during the application process or even after approval, any firm or any of its principals that fail to pay financial obligations to the federal government. For that last point there, examples of that are any tax liens, or if you've been delinquent on a student loan, if you defaulted on an SBA loan, or any other federal obligation, will lead them to finding that you do not have good character. So if you had like a tax lien in the past, perhaps, and maybe now you're on a payment plan, that's fine. As long as you can show that you have it and that you're current with that, then that's okay. You'll just need to submit documentation of that to prove that you do have the good character. Okay, now we're going to talk about the social disadvantage criteria to get into the program. So the definition of social disadvantage means that an individual has been subjected to racial, ethnic, or cultural bias within American society because of their identities as members of groups and without regard to their individual qualities. That discrimination or bias experienced by an individual must be chronic, substantial, and have occurred within American society. You will be asked to submit a narrative to prove your social disadvantage. And you only need to establish your social disadvantage once for the entirety of the program term. So the SBA must determine that the discrimination or bias experienced by an individual, like I said, is chronic, substantial, and has occurred within American society. So it couldn't have taken place in another country. And additionally, the discrimination must have negatively impacted your entry or advancement in the business world. So to demonstrate your social disadvantage, you should include the following elements. An indication of which identity or identities is or are the basis of social disadvantage. Clearly describing which identity or characteristics you possess which have been subject to discrimination helps SBA understand your experience and eligibility for the 8A program. Race, religion, ethnic origin, gender, sexual orientation, identifiable disability, isolation from American society, and others are all categories of identities or characteristics. So it is important to specify the identities or characteristics within the category or categories which form the basis of your social disadvantage. So, for example, you could say that you are a subcontinent Asian American woman. So those are specific identities within the race and gender categories. You will need to provide descriptions of incidents in which the bias or discrimination has occurred. These experiences should be related to education, employment, and business history. This can include current or previously owned companies. If you visit the link here on the Guide for Writing a Social Disadvantage Narrative, you will find examples of what to include in your narrative. Now, a socially disadvantaged individual must also be economically disadvantaged. So to be a participant in the program, you must be both socially and economically disadvantaged. It's not one or the other. You must be both. So if it's more than one applicant, all applicants must meet the criteria as well. So please keep that in mind. In order to be economically disadvantaged, the SBA reviews the individual's personal net worth, which must be less than $850,000 after we exclude all legitimate retirement accounts and any equity in the primary residence and the applicant firm. We also review the individual's total asset level, which may not exceed $6.5 million, with the only allowed exclusion being legitimate retirement accounts. Finally, the individual's average 3-year income may not exceed $400,000. Now, California is a community property state, so we will look at your spouse's assets as well. We will split everything 50-50. Whatever you claim to own on your own, 50% goes to your spouse and 50% will go on your personal financial statement, simply for purposes of determining your adjusted net worth. Your salary or income will be verified through your personal tax returns. If you are interested in calculating this for yourself before you apply for the program, you can look up SBA Form 413. It's listed at sba.gov, or you can do a quick Google search for it. This form helps you list out your assets. So if maybe there is something you didn't think about that we would ask for, that form will help you line by line calculate what your adjusted net worth would be. So those are the eligibility requirements for the 8A program. During the application process, you will be asked questions in all of these sections. So just make sure that you are honest and forthcoming when you complete the application. There are specific, questions that are asked on the application, and it's a big part of the eligibility criteria for the program. If you don't disclose information and the SBA discovers it, during their review, it's going to create more issues for your application. So just be upfront about it. We're often asked what would have an impact on your application. And if the analyst reviewing your application sees, a pattern of you constantly getting in trouble, you're in and out of jail, or if you have, felonies or any violence, if you're lacking like business integrity, right? If you're writing bad checks or things like that, that may negatively impact your application. Some things that really wouldn't have a big impact on your application is like, if they discover an underage drinking citation or a citation for recreational drug use, jaywalking, smaller things like that are not going to have, a negative impact on your application. But just be as honest as possible when you are answering those questions there on the application. When you are ready to apply, please visit My SBA Certifications. That blue button down there is a link to certifications.sba.gov. At the end of the presentation, I will provide information on that portal as well, so stick around for that. There are authorized resources available to you on SBA's website, as well as a dedicated email box for general information. Here locally, we can answer general questions about the 8A program, but we have no say when it comes to your application. Those don't actually get reviewed here locally. Those go through headquarters back in DC. So our analysts there review those applications. I do recommend that you reach out to one of our resource partners, such as the SBDC or SCORE, to review your application before you go ahead and submit it, just to make sure you're not missing anything. You can also visit my SBA certifications resources link for all tools, frequently asked questions, and program information for the 8A Business Development Program. So we have the how-to videos on here as well, the business applicant user guide. So check out those links, and they may help you as you go through the application program. Okay, so this concludes the information on the 8A program. I'm not seeing any pending questions in the queue. I think my colleagues have gotten to those as I've gone through the presentation, but again, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box as I'm going through the presentation, and we will get you an answer as we go along. Okay. So now let's move on and talk about the HUBZone program. We're going to cover the program benefits and the eligibility criteria. So first off, what is a HUBZone? A HUBZone is a historically underutilized business zone. So this program was designed to help small firms in certain communities gain access to federal contract opportunities. So HUBZone areas are they're typically areas of low median household incomes or high unemployment, or both. And we will talk about how you identify these zones in the following slides. So the HUBZone program certifies the eligibility of businesses in disadvantaged communities to compete for federal set-aside contracts, offering employment and growth opportunities where they're most needed for positive economic impact.
The government has a mandate of awarding 3% of all prime contract dollars to HUBZone certified firms. For reference, in FY24, the federal government spent $17.6 billion on HUBZone contracts. At any given time, there are about 5,000 small firms that are certified into the HUBZone program. There are contract set-asides and sole source opportunities for firms certified into the HUBZone program. HUBZone firms also receive a 10% price evaluation preference applied to full and open competition. So what does that mean? If you are certified as HUBZone and you bid on a project that is open to competition, then you get a 10% price evaluation preference applied to the contract when being compared to a large business. If solely based on price and you and a large business have the same pricing, they will apply that 10% price evaluation preference, meaning that they will add 10% to that large business so that your bid would be considered lower. This is the only federal program that applies this benefit outside of set-asides. Generally, your benefit is for your certification only, but this program lets you use it on full and open competition as well.
So where are these HUBZones? So across the country, there are more than 22,000 communities that are designated as HUBZones. HUBZones are designated based on economic and population data from the Census Bureau and other federal agencies using definitions that are established by Congress. The basis for all of these areas are high unemployment and or low income. Now, every 5 years, the HUBZone program is required to update the HUBZone designations to ensure the program continues to serve the communities most in need of assistance. This 5-year redesignation also provides small businesses with the ability to plan and invest in their HUBZone communities without fear that their designation may change from 1 year to the next. SBA regulations provide an additional 3 years of designation for expiring HUBZones, These are what are known as redesignated hub zones to help companies prepare for the transition to a new hub zone. Now, the map was last updated in 2023, so it will be updated again in July of 2028 to reflect changes to qualified census tracts and qualified non-metropolitan counties. It's going to be updated next year as well to reflect expiring redesignated areas. And then, throughout any year, it can be updated to reflect new and expiring governor-designated covered areas and qualified disaster areas as appropriate. So if you visit the SBA website, you can find the hub zone maps to look up your address and see if you are located within a hub zone. The map is color-coded and easy to read. You can play around with it, zoom in and out to identify qualified areas. So this is a good tool to use if you're thinking about moving your business or opening a new business. We do recommend that you enter a specific address for best results because if you're just eyeballing it, one side may be HUBZone and across the street it's not. So make sure you type out an address there for it to tell you whether or not you're in a qualified area. Okay, now let's go ahead and jump into the eligibility requirements for this program. So first, let's talk about size. So you must be a small business in accordance with SBA's size standard table. At time of application for certification, a HUBZone small business concern must meet the SBA's size standards for its primary industry classification. And then again, at time of initial contract offer, a HUBZone small business concern must be small for the size standard corresponding to the NAICS code assigned to the contract. In addition to size, we will also look at ownership. Your business must be directly and unconditionally owned and controlled by at least 51% U.S. citizens. If there are multiple owners making up that 51%, all owners must be U.S. citizens. The SBA does not consider holders of permanent visas and resident aliens to be citizens. Your business or principal office must be located within a designated hub zone. So principal office means the location where the greatest number of the concerned employees at any one location perform their work. If you have an employee that works at multiple locations, then the employee will be deemed to work at the location where the employee spends more than 50% of his or her time. If an employee does not spend more than 50% of his or her time at any one location, and at least one of those locations is a non-HUBZone location, then the employee will be deemed to work at a non-HUBZone location. In order for a location to be considered the principal office, the concern must conduct business at this location. Now, for those concerns whose primary industry classification is services or construction, the determination of principal office excludes the concern's employees who perform more than 50% of their work at job site locations to fulfill specific contract obligations. If all of a concern's employees perform more than 50% of their work at job sites, the concern does not comply with the principal office requirement. It may be a little tricky to identify, who you can count, who you cannot count. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us offline, and we can discuss that and help you make that determination. Now, aside from being located in a hub zone, at least 35% of your employees must also reside in a hub zone. Now, the SBA has its own definition as to what an employee is for purposes of applying to this program. So employee means all individuals employed on a full-time, part-time, or other basis, so long as that individual works a minimum of 10 hours per week. So this includes employees obtained from a temporary employee agency, leasing concern, or through a union agreement. Volunteers are not considered employees, and you cannot count them as part of the 35% requirement. The SBA defines reside to live in a primary residence at a place for at least 180 days or as a currently registered voter and with the intent to live there indefinitely. If you have an employee who just moved or they've been at their new address for 30 or 60 days, they can demonstrate their intent by updating their ID or driver's license and submitting a copy of that. When determining the percentage of employees that reside in a hub zone, if the percentage results in a fraction, round up to the nearest whole number. And like I said, if you have a specific scenario or you're unsure how to count employees and whether or not they qualify, feel free to reach out and we can talk about that offline. You can find the full qualification criteria for the HUBZone program in Title 13, Part 126, Subpart B of the Code of Federal Regulations. That's the red text that you see here on this slide. HUBZone regulations require that all certified HUBZone firms recertify annually that they remain in compliance with the program's requirements. Although there is no limit to the length of time a firm may qualify as a HUBZone firm, the certification is not a lifetime certification. You will need to recertify for the HUBZone program once a year around your approval date, your anniversary date. If a firm fails to recertify within the required time frame, the SBA will propose a firm for decertification. So once you are in the program, take a look at the recertification fact sheet for helpful tips on completing these steps. Headquarters will also send you an email reminder or notice when the time comes for your certification. So make sure you keep your email address up to date so that you don't miss any communication from them. During your active participation in the program, a program examination will also be required every 3 years. This may sometimes include a site visit that would be conducted by a member of the district office. A program examination is an investigation by SBA officials to verify the accuracy of any certification made or information provided as part of the HUBZone application or recertification process. You'll need to provide documents similar to those submitted with your initial application, which may include, your corporate documents, payroll records, utility bills, a copy of the lease or rental agreement. You'll have to submit things like that. You will receive an email from headquarters with instructions for completing this step as well. If a firm fails to respond, the SBA may propose decertification based on your failure to cooperate with the program examination. We have a link here as well to the program examination fact sheet, which has more information as well. The HUBZone program is managed out of DC, so to get more specific answers, we recommend that you contact them directly. There is a dedicated email address for all inquiries, hubzone@sba.gov. The HUBZone program also offers conference calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they are available during those times to answer any questions you may have. They have their website for the most up-to-date information as well, so check that out. And of course, we have a link there to the maps for you to look up your address or your employees' addresses to make sure that they are in a designated HUBZone area. Okay, I'm not seeing questions in the chat. If you have any questions that have come up about the 8A program or HUBZone program, please go ahead and type those out there. I do see somebody asking about a copy of the presentation, and yes, you will receive a copy of the presentation as well as a link to the recording, so you can follow along with that as well. Okay, now we're going to be talking about the Woman-Owned Small Business Certification, WOSB, and Economically Disadvantaged Woman-Owned Small Business Certification. So it's two different certifications for this one. For this one, when buying goods and services, The federal government limits competition for certain contracts to women-owned small businesses and economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses that participate in this program. So becoming certified for the program means that your business is eligible to compete for federal set-aside contracts that are within eligible industries. So these contracts are in industries where women-owned small businesses are underrepresented, and then the SBA maintains a list of those eligible industries and their NAICS codes. So it is important to note that the WOSB certification benefit only applies to federal contracting opportunities rather than those in the private sector.
The federal government's goal is to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to women-owned small businesses each year. Joining the WOSB Federal Contracting Program makes a business eligible to compete for federal contracts set aside for the program. Firms can still compete for contract awards under other socioeconomic programs that they also qualify for. Firms that choose not to participate in the SBA's WOSB Federal Contracting Program may continue to identify as a woman-owned small business in SAM.gov for the purposes of competing for other contracts. However, they will not be eligible to pursue federal contracts restricted for SBA certified women-owned small businesses and or economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. You see here at the bottom that for reference, we have that $31.7 billion were awarded to women-owned small businesses in FY24, mostly in industries under professional, scientific, and technical services, as well as construction.
So how do you know if the WOSB program is right for you? So let's touch on the eligibility criteria for this program. So to be eligible for this program, a business must be a small business concern for the primary NAICS code or contract. So the WOSB EDWOSB program has limited NAICS codes, and we'll discuss that a little more in the next few slides. At least 51% owned and controlled by one or more women who are U.S. citizens. The 51% ownership must be direct and unconditional. The women must manage the daily business operations, including, a woman must hold the highest officer position within the business. The woman must work at the business full-time during normal working hours. The women must have managerial experience required to run the business, and they must make long-term decisions for the business. There is no minimum amount of time for the business to be operational before you can apply for this program. In order to qualify as an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business, one or more economically disadvantaged women must unconditionally and directly own at least 51% of the applicant firm. Each individual whose ownership interest will be used to qualify for economic disadvantaged designation must submit documentation demonstrating their financial condition meets the defined economic thresholds. And you'll see that these are in line with the thresholds for the 8A Business Development Program. So personal net worth must be less than $850,000, excluding her ownership interest in the concern and her equity interest in her primary personal residence. Income must be $400,000 or less in adjusted gross income averaged over the previous 3 years preceding the certification. Total assets must be $6.5 million or less for the fair market value of all personal assets, including primary residence and the value of the business concern. In order to demonstrate eligibility for program participation, all applicants must provide proof of U.S. citizenship, regardless as to which certification you are applying for, WOSB or EDWOSB. The type of documentation required to be submitted to the SBA to prove the organization is owned, organized, and controlled by a qualifying owner or owners depends on the applicant business's legal form. So make sure or double check that the documents have to be valid at the time of submission and have the required signatures. Note that the information contained in these documents regarding owners, percentages, and shareholders should align exactly with the information submitted in the application. For LLCs, you will need to provide things such as the articles of organization or operating agreement. If you're a corporation, you'll need to provide your articles of incorporation, bylaws, stock ledgers. So the analyst reviewing your application, they need to be able to see or for you to prove on paper that, a woman or women are the ones running the business in order for you to participate in this program. In addition to all other required documents, applicants that wish to qualify as an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business will be required to also report financial information for all owners comprising 51% ownership interest to ensure economic disadvantage thresholds are not exceeded. So the following documents will be required for all individuals that make up that 51% ownership. You will need to submit your federal personal tax returns from the last 2 years, including your W-2s, any schedules, and attachments. If you don't have W-2s, you can submit your 1099s. You will also need to submit federal business tax returns from the last 2 years, financial statements, and retirement account statements. So funds invested in an official retirement account will be excluded from the assessment of an economically disadvantaged individual's personal net worth. Personal financial information, this is required for each woman that is claiming economic disadvantage and for each woman's spouse. So detailed information is needed regarding the value of all assets, including cash on hand and in banks, accounts and notes receivable, any retirement accounts, stocks, bonds, personal property, real estate, life insurance, any other assets. For your liabilities, we're going to take a look at the loans, tax debts, mortgages, or any other liabilities which you may be accountable for. And then, your income is going to include your salary, investment income, real estate income, or any other sort of income that you have. Now, the economic disadvantage is a subset of the Woman-Owned Small Business Program, right? EDWOSB and WOSB. If you qualify as an EDWOSB, you automatically qualify as a WOSB. If you have more than one woman making up that 51% ownership, all women will need to submit this information, the tax returns, 1099s, W-2s. So please keep that in mind. So as I mentioned, to qualify for this program, your NAICS code must fall under a certain list of eligible industries. Not all NAICS codes are eligible to participate in this program. So these contracts for women-owned small businesses and economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses are for specific industries where women, are underrepresented. And the SBA maintains a list. So you see that link here at the bottom of this slide, eligible NAICS codes. You want to check that out. If your NAICS code is not on either list, there are no contract opportunities for you under this program. So, it wouldn't be worthwhile for you to apply. Of the 733 eligible industries, 626 are designated for limited competition among all WOSB program participants, and an additional 107 NAICS codes are eligible for competition among economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. Congress requires the SBA to conduct a study every 5 years to identify industries in which small businesses owned and controlled by women are underrepresented in the federal marketplace. The most recent study was conducted in October of 2022. So you can find the full study on our website if you're interested in checking that out as well. The WOSB Federal Contract Program offers multiple avenues for firms seeking assistance. The SBA's dedicated resource partners are always available to help our small businesses. Firms can also use the SBA's local assistance tool to contact their local SBA district office or Women's Business Center, another one of our resource partners. This program is managed by headquarters, and only they can answer questions regarding your application. So you can reach out to them at WOSB@SBA.gov. If you are interested in signing up for training directly from our program office, please send them an email to wosbtraining@sba.gov to get their latest schedule. Now, whenever practicable, the SBA will make its determination or complete its review of your application within 90 calendar days after receipt of a complete application. Okay, let me check the chat really quick. I don't think anything has come up in the chat. Okay, it looks like we're good. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them out in there. Now we're going to talk about the Veteran Small Business Certification. It's going to be our shortest presentation before I give you a brief little overview of the application portal. So this is the Veteran Small Business Certification. So every year the federal government awards a portion of contracting dollars specifically to businesses that are owned by veterans. Small businesses owned by veterans may be eligible as well to purchase surplus property from the federal government, and I'll give a little more information on that in one of my slides here. Okay, so the federal government aims to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses each year. Competition is limited for certain federal contract opportunities to businesses that participate in the service-disabled veteran-owned small business program. So joining the program makes your business eligible to compete for the program's set-aside and sole source contracts. Certified veteran-owned small businesses, so if you're not service-disabled, but you are a veteran-owned small business, you have additional opportunities to pursue sole source and set-aside contracts at the VA, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, under their program called the VA's VetCert Program. The VA sets aside at least 7% of its contracts each year specifically for certified veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. To apply for certification with SBA as a veteran-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned small business, a firm must meet the following requirements. You must be identified by the VA as a veteran or service-disabled veteran. You must be considered a small business as defined by the SBA size standard table corresponding to any NAICS code listed in the business's SAM profile. You must have no less than 51% of the business owned and controlled by one or more veterans. For certification as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, you must have no less than 51% of the business owned and controlled by one or more veterans rated as service-disabled by the VA. For those veterans who are permanently and totally disabled and unable to manage the daily business operations of their business may still qualify if their spouse or appointed permanent caregiver is assisting in that management. You must complete an application and submit your supporting documentation at My SBA Certifications. Veteran-owned small businesses can access federally owned personal property that is no longer in use through the General Services Administration's Federal Surplus Personal Property Donation Program. So veteran-owned small businesses may get federal surplus property from the SASP in the state where the property will be primarily located and used. So you will have to agree to the terms and conditions that are listed on this slide. And you must agree in writing that your veteran-owned small business is located and operated, within the state, is unconditionally owned and controlled by one or more eligible veterans, that you will use the property in the normal conduct of your business activities, that you are registered in SBA's VetCert Program database, that you won't sell, transfer, loan, or lease the property, right? Please contact the state agency for surplus property in your state for more information. And also check out the General Services Administration's Federal Surplus Personal Property Program. So you can obtain, personal property that the government no longer needs. This surplus property includes all types and categories of personal property, except for land or other real property, certain naval vessels, and of course, records of the federal government. To get the most up-to-date information on this program, I encourage you to visit the SBA's website. This program is managed out of headquarters, and we do not have access to your application here in the field. For program-specific questions, please reach out to vetcert@sba.gov. And for more general questions, you can reach out to your local district office or one of our resource partners. If you rather speak to someone, there is a dedicated call center that can assist, and the number is listed here on this slide. The call center is available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And just for reference, as of January of 2024, I believe the SBA database of certified veteran-owned small businesses had grown to like over 25,000 firms. So I'm sure it keeps growing, month after month. So it's a great program to participate in if you are eligible for that. Okay, now I'm going to give you a quick little walkthrough of the application portal, certifications.sba.gov. Our new portal just opened up this year, so it was created, to reduce any unnecessary customer burden. The SBA has combined its separate small business certification systems with distinct, applications and review procedures. So before, you needed to visit 4 different portals if you were trying to apply for, 4 different programs. And now they've combined all of that into this new system, My SBA Certifications. So this is now your one-stop destination for all SBA certifications. Here you will be able to apply for and manage multiple certifications in one place. So this should help eliminate, processing times, cut that down, and they should be able to get it to that within 90 days, approval or certification status once you've applied. When you visit certifications.sba.gov, you will want to click on the little box there that says, "Should I apply?" To get started. The system is going to ask you a series of questions related to business ownership, NAICS codes, your readiness, and eligibility. When you click on that ownership section, it's going to ask you, things like, are you a veteran? Are you a U.S. citizen? What's your sex? Are you claiming social disadvantage? Things like that. In the match section, that's where it's going to ask you, to type in your NAICS code to see how much the federal government has awarded in your field to help you, determine, do you sell what the government buys? In the readiness section, it's going to ask you questions about, is your business ready to take full advantage of the SBA certification program? Do you have a track record of delivering quality goods and services? Can you invoice and receive payments electronically? It's a lot of yes and no questions on there just to kind of, get an idea as to which programs you may be eligible for. In the eligibility section, it's going to ask you, do you own a small business located in the U.S.? Do you believe your principal office is located in a hub zone? Are you registered in SAM? Things like that. And then, once you answer those questions in that little module there, it's going to give you your results. So based on your responses, you will see a matrix like the one we have here, indicating which programs you may be eligible for. From there, you want to visit the knowledge base to preview the application questions, and you can read, tips for success and know what documents to have ready when you're going to go ahead and apply for the certification. So if it tells you that you're eligible for all of the programs and you want to apply for all of them, great. If right now you're thinking okay, you know what, I'm just going to apply for the HUBZone program, I don't feel completely ready for 8A, you can just check off the HUBZone. Just because it tells you like, okay, yes, you may be eligible, doesn't mean you have to apply for it right now. You can always come back and apply for a different certification later on if you're not ready for it at the time that you start the application. Here is a sample of all the information you will find in the knowledge base. How do I create a My SBA certifications account? You can look up supporting documents guide, the application preview. So I invite you to check them out before you start the application process or if you get stuck somewhere along the way. At the top here, that's a live link that'll take you right to the knowledge base. So be sure to click on that once you get a copy of the presentation. Here is a timeline of the application process. You will need to register your firm with SAM before you create an account in My SBA. You will complete the application and upload supporting documentation in the portal. Everything will be done inside the portal. Once the SBA receives the application, we will conduct a check of all the documents. If everything looks good, we will notify you that we have a complete application and we'll soon begin the review. It will be assigned to an analyst. If documents are incomplete or missing, we will issue a deficiency letter outlining what is missing, and the application will be returned to you. We give you more time to gather those documents and resubmit your application. After a complete application is received, an analyst will begin the review, and they may request additional information from the applicant before a final decision is rendered. The analyst will make a recommendation to the director of the program for which you have applied. So we have a director for the 8A program, one for the HUBZone, WOSB, veteran certification. The director makes the final decision to approve or deny your application. Once that decision is made, you will receive a letter. That letter serves as your official date of entry into the program and/or programs if you've applied for more than one. And then your approval date will be listed in SAM and the Small Business Search System. If you need assistance along the way, please feel free to reach out to our office or one of our resource partners that can assist for free with the process. We've heard, of people setting up their SAM profile and all of a sudden they start getting, solicitations from like consultants wanting to charge them hundreds, thousands of dollars to help them with the application process. Please note that you can do this completely for free on your own or with the assistance of our office, our resource partners. So there's no need for you to go and incur that cost to complete the application. Please keep that in mind. If you experience any technical issues with the new portal, please submit a ticket to the service desk. We have that linked here on this slide. And again, they have like documents on there on frequently asked questions. We have a link to our SBA resource partners. If you have any trouble with SAM or the Small Business Search System, all of those links are listed here as well. So this concludes our presentation for today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As I said, you will receive a copy of the presentation as well as a link to the recording. I will stay on for a couple more minutes to see if we get any more questions here in the Q&A box. But if not, thank you so much. We hope you join us at our future events. And, go ahead and submit those applications, get certified for our SBA programs. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day.